all. It's a pleasure again connecting with you from a remote location on a very invigorating discussion on water, particularly on water sanitation and hygiene today. We intend to make this very informal, and as I speak to you, I just had a sip of coffee. We request you to also grab a cup of coffee and relax from your day's busy schedule and try and put in your perspectives, listen to the experts, make it a very lively discussion in the next 1.5 hours time frame. So the agenda for discussion today, or the topic which we wanted to discuss today, is on something on water sanitation and hygiene. I would request Radhika to introduce the expert today. Before she introduces the speaker, I would introduce Radhika herself, in the sense Radhika has joined ICCW, International Center for Clean Water, a center of excellence on water, particularly clean water. So she has joined our organization on October 1st, and she would be heading the activity of outreach of all our activities at ICCW. So Radhika is a experienced person in journalism, technical journalism to say specifically, and she has been doing a lot of work on working with people on getting their interviews on technical topics. So she has a wide experience on bringing several technical topics to the front in terms of the newspapers and so on. So I would just stop here and request Radhika to introduce our expert speaker and the other expert panelists. We are not calling them panelists today, but we are calling them as experts who would be sharing their perspectives along with Dr. Nimisha and the attendees. I would request them to post their questions in the Q&A box, where I would pick up almost all of them to try and answer them through our experts. So over to Radhika, please.
Hello everyone, good evening. So welcome to the Water Talk 5, and we are all happy to invite you for the wonderful talk ahead by Dr. Nimisha. I have just joined ICCW, and I'm looking forward to work with all of you to know more about water, the technology, and the things we are discussing here. For the past 13 years, I was working with major media organizations in India, from Network 18 Group to Indian Express to India Today. So I'm very happy this is my next move with ICCW, and I'm very happy and looking forward to have an exciting career here. Today we are going to have a talk by Dr. Nimisha. Hope most of us know him. He's the MD of Toilet Board Coalition, India chapter. I'm just 1 minute. Excuse me. Dr. Nimisha is a sustainable business leader with more than 25 years of experience with Unilever R&D, and as a MD with Toilet Board Coalition, he's building an innovation-led hygiene and sanitation economy through entrepreneurship and private sector engagement. Shah has authored 15 patents and is an expert in wash, water sanitation, food safety, health and hygiene. He has also authored a book called Swachh Bharat for Swasth Bharat, Clean India for Healthy India, and had built partnerships with influential stakeholders at a global and national level, incubators and startups. He's also a champion of digital transformation, and he's also a mentor and coach for the future leaders. And we also have panelist Professor Pradeep from IIT Madras, Professor Indumati Nambi, Manish from UNICEF, Nandakumar and Shripati. I think we can start. Sandhya Srivastava also will join as a panelist. Over to you, Dr. Nimisha.
Thank you, Radhika. And firstly, I would like to congratulate the team at ICCW, Professor Pradeep, Professor Dr. Nandakumar, Shripati, and Radhika yourself. I think the format of this talk, end of the day, informal chat, is perhaps better and more productive and more engaging than we attending day-long conferences. So here, perhaps in an hour or hour and a half, we can have much more productive discussion amongst us and leading to some actions. And therefore, I like this platform. So congratulations for setting this up, and thank you for inviting me. And Radhika, thank you for your kind words in introducing me. I wish to share some thoughts on, how exactly we can convert some of our challenges that our country faces into an opportunity that can drive overall development and also help the country in its economy and job creation. And with that, I would first like to give a bit of a background of Toilet Board Coalition. Is the slide online for everybody now?
Yes, it is online.
Right.
Okay, so I'll go to the slides just a minute. Yeah. So Toilet Board Coalition is a global organization that was founded in 2015. And the idea there was really, how does private sector help and complement the efforts of governments and NGO sectors to really bring about that change on clean water and sanitation, which the world really needs as one of the critical SDGs to achieve development in the world. And with that, few global companies like Unilever, Lixil, Kimberly-Clark, Firmenich came together and formed this coalition to drive scale up of sanitation. One of its flagship program being that of a startup accelerator, and that has been very successful with more than 32 companies having accelerated, and 12 of those originated from India. So that was one of the key rationales for setting up a chapter in India. India has a very vibrant startup ecosystem. India has depth of science, very high grade technologies, including digital, and therefore it made sense for Toilet Board to set up a chapter in India. And I was then at Unilever, and I thought that no better opportunity than this to really make an impact for the society, for the country. So that brought me to Toilet Board India chapter. And what we wish to do is really leapfrog the progress of SDG 6 at speed and scale through sustainable entrepreneurial innovation. So scale is a keyword, sustainability is a keyword, and entrepreneurship is a keyword, and innovation is a keyword there for us at Toilet Board Coalition. So that's briefly about Toilet Board Coalition. Now, when we look at ourselves as a country, I just put together these three simple figures, and I'm not saying that they are accurate, and they are absolutely correct, but they are in that ballpark figures scale wise, that we have 1.3 billion humans, 400 million farmed animals, of which more than 250 million are actually cattle, which produce a lot of waste. And then, assuming 100 liters per person per day, we could at least have 130 billion liters of wastewater that is emerging out of human activity. I have not considered the other water streams here, but just that one. Yeah. So if we look at it, then it could really sound like a one big problem, 1.3 billion human beings producing waste and 400 million farmed animals producing waste. But if we look at it slightly differently, the only resource that keeps on increasing with increasing population is human waste. Yeah. So how do we flip the thinking and challenge the conventions and look at it differently is what I would be sharing today. Also, the thing is that often we do not quite understand the consequences of inaction. There are many, and right now, as we see, COVID-19 is also something of decades of development without considerations for environment, without consideration for ecosystem diversity, and those consequences are really emerging as big challenge for the world. Yeah. So the price for inaction can be greater than the cost of making a mistake, and therefore we need to experiment, we need to learn, we need to think differently, and we need to change the course of action that we have taken so far. And for that, I think no other concept better defines what we are going through right now than this concept of planetary boundaries, which was published around 2009 by the Stockholm Environment Institute. And basically, what the planetary boundary concept tells us is that there are 9 key dimensions of environment that human activity has impacted. And those impacts have been either under a certain boundary or they have exceeded the acceptable risk level boundary, and some of those have really exceeded and gone far beyond into very high risk areas. I would think that phosphorus, nitrogen, and the loss of biodiversity are key problems. The freshwater use and withdrawal appears to be in control, but it is not necessarily in control geography-wise. So some countries face tremendous freshwater duress, while others may not face as well. So there is a bit of an imbalance there. And also how now health has taken center stage with COVID-19. It is reasonable to assume that COVID-19 crossed over to human beings as a result of a virus that earlier existed in the wild, crossing over to humans because of the breaking of the barriers of the boundaries between wild and human civilization. So therefore, it would be right to suggest and say that our survival is at high risk, and unless we do things differently and we take things very seriously now and address those challenges, our survival could be at stake. And this has been told often, despite skepticism about climate change. There is definitely evidence about climate change and various other parameters outlined here on the planetary boundaries. Now, coming to India, of course, many of you already are aware of several challenges. So not that I intend to go through the list of those challenges, but to just highlight a couple of issues that, over 60% of urban India's sewage enters water bodies untreated because of lack of capacity. And last year it was really very moving to see the intense water scarcity and the water stress experienced in cities across India, particularly Chennai, where people were not having water. Yeah. So on one hand, there is this, gray water which contains maybe up to a few thousand ppm of extraneous matter in it, which gets thrown away and not recovered. And on the other hand, millions of people suffer intense water stress. So we are in a bit of a paradoxical situation on these counts. And therefore, I believe that it's time to rethink and go circular, wherein we think waste as a resource. And also, can we think about very different models of reaching water, sanitation and hygiene services? And there I can possibly consider two scenarios in the second point, is that can we move from a city scale to a community scale? And I also would like to touch upon something which might be relevant in very specific situations like urban slums, where one should think about moving from household scale to community scale. Yeah. And as we move, I will share some thinking with some examples to illustrate these aspects. What I believe will happen if we think about it in this manner is that we will get cleaner water bodies and cleaner environment. There will be lower greenhouse gas emissions and improved energy security, especially renewable energies. Overall, there will be improved health and fewer public health crises like the ones that we are dealing with today. And of course, it opens up a new avenue of entrepreneurship, wealth creation, jobs, skills, and livelihoods. And I do think that going circular, treating waste as a resource, and looking at community scale solutions and innovations would help us achieve these outcomes. Toilet Board in 2017 published a seminal work describing the sanitation economy to be made up of three pieces: the toilet economy, the smart sanitation economy, and the circular sanitation economy. And I will be dwelling and focusing on the circular sanitation economy for today's water talk. Now, we published in 2017 a report on the sanitation economy in India, and we estimated that in 2017 the overall sanitation economy could be worth $32 billion per year, and it could go up to 62 billion by 2021. Within that, we also estimated that the circular sanitation economy could be worth $14 billion then, and could be $25 billion in 2021. Now, as we speak, we are writing the next report, the next edition of this report. And what we found is that if we were to look at the entirety of resources, that is the human waste only, not animal waste, and the water that gets used during the process of sanitation and sanitation services, that entirety of products and services could be worth nearly $40 billion in 2021. So our previous estimate of 25 billion in 2021 is now showing us that we had underestimated 2021 and it could be as high as 40 billion. So you will see this report being published next month sometime, middle of next month, yeah, which will have all the details. But basically, we have considered products like biogas, heat, nitrogen, phosphate, and potassium, as well as water treatment and recycled water, etc. Yeah. Now, I want to go into a bit of a detail when we talk about circular sanitation and what it could imply on a country like India. We all know that under Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, India did a phenomenal high-speed, accelerated coverage of sanitation, constructing over 100 million rural toilets, and which are essentially pit latrine. We published a paper in 2017 whilst I was at Unilever, estimating the various environmental impacts of different scenarios of sanitation technologies that could that when extrapolated to 100 million scale, what it would mean. Yeah. So there are these two charts you can see. The one on the left hand side is talking about the global warming potential, and the one on the right hand side is about fossil and nuclear energy use. What we basically are saying there is that there are four types. We considered four types of toilet systems. The first one is the normal urban toilet, where the discharge is connected to a centralized wastewater treatment plant. Then we have considered twin pit latrine. The next one was a source separation latrine, where the urine and feces are separated. And the last one was a biogas connected latrine. And what we found is that when the twin pit latrine had the highest global warming potential, followed that by source separation, followed by wastewater treatment plant, and finally biogas treatment actually gave negative global warming potential. And the reason for that is that when the human waste is accumulating in the pits, it leads to anaerobiosis and generation of methane, which is almost 25 times higher global warming potential than CO2. So when you convert that methane and burn it and CO2 is emitted, you neutralize that impact. Similarly, on fossil energy use, when you construct large wastewater treatment plants at the end of the cities, you really use up a lot of fossil and nuclear energies. Whereas when you construct decentralized systems, you don't use that much of energy, and in fact, when connected with biogas, obviously you will have a positive energy released from that for use. Yeah, so this was a piece of work that has always, inspired me on the circular economy rational, compelling sense that it makes. And therefore, I am an advocate of circular economy thinking in the space of water, sanitation, and hygiene. Now, as we speak, I am seeing that in that pursuit of sanitation for all, I'm seeing new age entrepreneurs driving a quiet revolution. And these people, or I would say thought leaders, are using digital and automation. They are creating entrepreneurship and livelihoods. They are doing innovation at scale. Many of them are thinking about sustainability and circular, and also promoting health and hygiene. So I'm again, not because I am taking the names of the companies, but I don't hesitate when they are doing the right things to show that these are the people who are making a difference here. I would take a few examples, and these examples are, not exhaustive, but something that we have come across in our ecosystem and have known in the overall sector, and they are driving huge differences, yeah, and making a big change in the sector of sanitation. So the first example is a company called 3S Saraplast, which are doing more than 1 million services per year, almost 10 million users, and they are now coming up with a very unique model of a bus called T-Bus. So when municipal corporations or the city transport finally have buses that are not going to be in service, they are almost dead and unusable, these people have converted them into paid hygienic toilets for women who are outside on work. Similarly, this entrepreneur Wulu is providing a subscription to women who work and need to use toilets outside of home, calling themselves as Women's Powder Room. Again, highly digital, kind of a business proposition. The third one, Eram Scientific, I believe we would have some of their leaders in the audience today. And again, they have built very compelling public sanitation innovations. Garv Toilet, Loo Cafe, and Lutel. All of these are now doing scale. They are talking of millions of users, and they are talking of thousands of locations and all the stuff. Yeah. So there is a revolution happening in this space, led by new age entrepreneurs, and almost all of them are driving digital as one of their core business elements, either for better consumer user experience or for better business efficiencies. Yeah. So therefore, I would say the future of restroom is here, and it is all smart. They are all doing smart things using digital. But slowly, I'm also seeing that they have understood the value of and the challenge relating to waste treatment and the resources trapped in this waste. So I believe that if a technical leadership such as the one that exists at ICCW, if it produces technologies that can be translated directly into business solutions, then circular will be the next big thing, because all of these people are having standalone businesses, and they would want to minimize the cost of treating waste and all the stuff. Yeah. So already in the innovator's mind, in the entrepreneur's mind, circular is there. It's just that how can these technologies be made available at scale and at cost effective levels. Yeah. Also, I would like to speak about this company, Systema Bio. They are again doing very compelling work in the circular biogas production. Again, very compelling and very useful technologies, reliable, unlike previous versions of these technologies, and they have scale. They have installed more than 6,000 biogas plants in India, and they give lots of different options of the output, ranging from cooking fuel to heating to mechanical energy or electrical energy, and also generating biofertilizers. Yeah. So things at scale have begun happening slowly and steadily, and I think India has a very unique opportunity to kind of demonstrate that our waste challenge is in fact an opportunity to make wealth and improve the environment at the same time. Now, here is a thought, which is again, something which we can, after this slide, we can open up the discussion with the panel and think about it this way. So we are rapidly urbanizing country, yeah. Though at the moment we have about 66% of the population living in rural India, very soon the balance will move over to the urban part, yeah. We expected that by 2030, more than 50% would be in urban India. Now, there are two aspects to think about here. Whether urbanization should occur at the present level of inefficiencies and ineffectiveness of wastewater treatment, wherein you take the waste of millions of people 10 miles, 20 miles down the city in a large wastewater treatment plant and then try to treat it with little impact, with little effectiveness, and then throw the untreated thing either in Bay of Bengal or Arabian Sea or Yamuna as you be, or can we think about mainstreaming decentralized wastewater treatment, reuse, energy, nutrient, and recovery? And can these kind of things be incorporated within the design to begin with? A simple thought, can a new building to begin with separate the grey water discharge lines and the black water discharge lines? Now that would lend amenability for the grey water to be reused at very low, I would say, investment and high effectiveness, and the black water might be amenable to other bioenergy or other kind of use. So can the building community fundamentally change their thinking and incorporate these kind of things in the design itself? Yeah. And there are already, it's not that this is something very novel and needs to be tried and tested. Already there are several large housing communities where such experiments have been successful and are working at scale. It's only that its widespread adoption needs to be in some way made through policy making or through the builders advocacy, platforms like CREDAI, etc. It can be promoted. The other thing obviously is the services. So that the first example I was talking about is how to convert from centralized systems to decentralized housing community scale systems. And the other example I want to speak about is high density, low income communities like the slums. And again, many of these households live in a very small tenement, 150 square feet, 5 people staying. Now, if you use up 20 square feet of that to put a toilet, which may not necessarily have the necessary drainage, discharge, safe discharge systems, then you are creating another problem. Versus if there were community wash services. And I came across a very unique example of a Suvidha center piloted by Unilever. They have 4 Suvidha centers in Mumbai slums, where what they do is that they take an existing municipal toilet block, break it down, and construct a 3-storied structure. And within that, there is an element of grey water recycling because they provide bathing and laundromat facilities for people to pay and use, and that water is treated to use in the flushes, and therefore the toilets also remain clean. Now, what it does to such a community is that it is an affordable wash service. It frees up space. Health and hygiene are ensured because these toilets are maintained very clean. Soap is provided, disinfection is done, etc. The households themselves become less water intensive. Instead of storing water in large drums for number of days, they can store minimal water because all their water needs are being taken up by the community center, which is also recycling. And then the wastewater disposal challenges also get addressed simultaneously. So these I was considering are the emerging templates for wastewater management in urban scenarios. And if these are promoted, we can very well address the water stress, water scarcity, but also improve the livability of the cities and prevent environmental degradation. So I would want to stop with that and open up for the panel to discuss, and we can take things from there. Happy to answer any questions, etc.
Dr. Nimish, it was a crisp idea that you have presented for us to work on several aspects that need a lot of care. A lot of care in terms of technologies, a lot of care in terms of actions, a lot of care in terms of funding, and the technologies that need to be adopted at various levels, right from urban locations to even in urban, we have slums, we have structured housing societies and so on. Opportunities are coming up in a very big way. But one question which we have been trying to address or trying to understand is, when we discussed with you in the beginning, like what would be the impact of inaction and what would be the technologies that can avoid this impacts of inaction, and what would be the mass implementation methodologies or some best practices that are existing all over the world that can be brought into the Indian context. So all these questions are still remained unanswered, or we could not understand this as a mass implementation methodology. Probably you have brought in some templates now, but the major question that we have been seeing is the funding is available, but who's going to fund it? Who's having that fund? And for what purpose they would like to fund this, and who would get the benefit, whether the funder or the end user? We are still having those kinds of a lot of questions coming up in our minds. So this is one thought which I wanted to share with you. Of course, this is an informal session that we are trying to go through as of now. With this, a lot of new avenues are opened up now with your explanation, with your expertise, with your experiences, and we have Professor Indumati Nambi and Mr. Manish Vasuja also from UNICEF to share their perspectives. So before I would open up the Q&A, we have a few questions lined up here. I would request Professor Pradeep if you have any thoughts to share before we request Professor Nambi and Manish to join.
Well, it was an eye-opener in the sense that you introduced the scale first. This scale is unimaginable scale. We are talking about 100 billion people. 120 crores of people, and they are putting something like close to about 12 crore kilograms of carbon and nitrogen and phosphorus and all that pushed together. You presented the scale in the context of circular economy. I have one thought to add to that, which I would like to get your reaction. India is largely rural, and that rural India is becoming urban. And what it means in this context of $40 billion you are talking about of material that is there in human waste. Essentially, it is the price of NPK
Yeah.
And it is also essentially it is the price of elements, matter.
Yeah.
This matter is largely moved from rural India to urban India. And there is a great imbalance, that matter imbalance, that is brought about by human activity. And unless this is addressed such that the circular economy brings back the equilibrium of matter, the rural landscape is going to be depleted.
Yes.
And you touched upon that in the beginning, depleted. So the circular economy, the toilet economy that you are building also should look at the equilibrium of materials and their equitable distribution in the long run. How will you address that with technology in this rapidly changing country is a concern.
Yes, Professor Pradeep, I think you have made a very, very important point. You know, as chemist, I can fully understand that you are looking at the mass balance of the equation. Yeah. And essentially what is happening is that something gets produced in rural India and gets transported to urban, and in that mass balance goes completely haywire. Yeah. And we keep on taking out from rural, creating problems for them, and we put more and more in urban and create another problem for urban, you know. So it's a net imbalance at both the places, and I don't think that we have a answer to address that imbalance. But I think what really needs to be considered is that the way we have thinking so far about human as well as animal and agricultural waste needs to change completely, turn it around and put back resources into the rural farming landscape so as to enrich them. And after you enrich them, you take out some things for urban that may be less imbalanced than the thing we have today. And I think that kind of a direction the country has to take sooner or later. Sooner the better, I would say.
Thank you. Sripati, that is all that I had to add for want of time. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Nimish, for the brief explanation about what we can think of in the immediate future for the imbalance that Professor pointed out on the waste management. We have not only the solid waste, but we have the liquid waste also. We have been discussing during our COVID series on how this disinfectants and the contamination and so on, how this is going to be really handled by the operators, by the plants, by the sewage treatment plants. And it is ultimately going into the river, streams, lakes, and the natural ecosystem that we are enjoying it as of today. So Professor Indumati had a query or had a question before we started discussing on live. So Professor Indumati would like to share her perspectives on this liquid waste that we are thinking about, and she's been a pioneer in zero carbon challenge as an activity at IIT Madras. I would not take much time. I would request Professor to share her perspectives.
Thank you, Sripati. Yeah, I'm glad you brought zero carbon challenge. I wanted to talk about that also a little bit. So basically, we are looking at attracting young minds to come up with clean tech innovations in managing water, wastewater, all with a very low energy. So we have successfully run 2 cohorts of this competition. It's a year-round competition where we train the students on entrepreneurship also and fund them to come up with large prototypes so that it's visible and it can scale up immediately. So we're very happy that 25 plus 25, 50 prototypes have come out of it in different areas. many in water sanitation also. And one of my own teams have been coming up with the exact solutions what we are talking about today, circular economy in sanitation. So we're taking sanitation to the next level where we can take up nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, segregate it right at the source, and prepare fertilizers which can be used at source also. So I can talk about that a little maybe later offline. But continuing with the points you had presented today, I would like to have a discussion on centralized versus decentralized. You know, we have been pushing for decentralization, but when you're looking at nutrient management, water recycle, and treatment, decentralized systems become quite challenging at a smaller scale. These things are often works at a large scale at a treatment plant. So I would like to know your thoughts on how do we make this whole decentralized setups. First of all, in terms of maintenance, and the skill levels are high, the cost is high. How do we come up with successful business models? Startups are coming up, but they are struggling. You know? So we are looking at successful business models where maintenance is not an issue. Often, many of these fail due to poor maintenance and cost of maintenance.
Sure. So thanks, Professor Indu. I think you are making a very, very crucial point here. And the way I look at it is that if we think of decentralized treatment as treatment only, unlikely that beyond a certain scale, at lesser scales, it might be economically viable. Yeah. On the other hand, if we look at decentralized systems as a means to get value, both in terms of recovered water for reuse and recovered either energy, if which is perhaps one of the most expensive things that housing complexes deal with in urban cities, it could lend itself to viability. At the same time, I agree that, you know, if you have a small apartment with say 25, 30 households, you might need to consider various other streams, including say household wet waste, etc., to be supplemented. But viability will come only at a certain scale, I agree, provided there is a circular element ingrained in that. And I think it's also about the innovation. I'm seeing that a lot of activity is happening in the space of saying that, okay, we are say a 20 household villa complex. Can we make ourselves free of any external services, for example? And things start from there and then end up becoming scalable. Yeah. So I would say that, yes, definitely the point you're making is very crucial. But if we were to think of it in a circular way, maybe there are opportunities to explore and it can happen. Sorry, you seem to be on mute.
Oh, sorry. So yeah, exactly what I was thinking. You have pointed out circular, making it circular by recovering water, recovering nutrients, and recovering energy, right? If it's biogas, but often the struggle is to set up the supply chain downstream and upstream, right? So how do we go take these fertilizers to the place where you can market it? No, and biogas again, small quantities. Of course, we need to use it, at the point of generation. So establishing the supply chain becomes quite a challenge. So you're very right. Innovations are required. Youngsters should make this work as a business model. It cannot rely on the government funds or NGO funds. I think we need to move beyond that.
Yes, indeed. So if you know that there is this very small but definitely there industry which picks up gold from dust, yeah, and the gold hidden in dust is like several small ppm, yeah, but people dig it because it is of value, yeah. Here whatever we are throwing, everything has value, but it is up to us to find the right way of extracting the money out of the making wealth out of it. And I think it should be feasible. It's not easy, but if it was easy, everybody would have done it. If only when it is difficult, people can make money out of it and make profits out of it. So
rightly said. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Nimish. Professor, we would again take up an offline call with Dr. Nimish and see how things could be improved in our discussions. And please stay on till 7:30, Professor, if you are available. And
Yeah, sure.
I request Mr. Manish to share his perspectives as a person from WASH specialist from UNICEF. Dr. Nimish, you might have heard about Mr. Manish Vasuja. He's our WASH specialist from UNICEF from Delhi, and he closely works with the Jal Shakti Ministry, particularly on the rural drinking water supply and sanitation sector. Mr. Manish, your perspectives?
Pleasure to meet you, Manish.
You're able to hear us, Manish?
Manish, yeah, would we request you to turn on your video if possible?
Yeah, am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah. So first of all, I would like to congratulate Mr. Nimish Shah for his excellent deliberation and the useful interactions which we are having. Actually, it is more kind of practical approach rather than talking about program and in a theoretical mode. So I think that's useful. My point is, I extend where Professor Pradeep left. So we are talking about these technologies, these state-of-the-art technologies with public-private partnerships, private players playing a huge role in executing those contracts of service delivery or improved services, if I can say, in urban areas primarily, because that's where it is kind of getting more concentrated, high densely populated, and then we have those kind of practical solutions to it. But when we talk about rural areas, this needs to be kind of further contextualized in terms of technologies, in terms of management. And as Professor Indu mentioned, how we can bring in again to make it self-sufficient or sustainable, how we can bring in the professionalization into that sector also in rural areas. So that is, I think, for me, it is more kind of challenging, because even at government level, government has now put up resources in terms of tied funding or dedicated funding in 15 Finance Commission funds, where almost 30,000 crores are available for operation and maintenance at GP level across the country for operation and maintenance of wash services, water sanitation. So funds are available, issues are there, we have technologies which needs to be contextualized, and I think where the question is how private players, institutions like IIT, IICM, incubators can play a role in taking these technological solutions or adapting these technological solutions to those rural contexts. Thank you.
Dr. Nimish, your views?
Yeah, I agree that, rural is far more challenging because it is very dispersed. When there is one service provider in urban, that service provider can very easily service one entire city through one kind of an organizational setup. Whereas in case of rural, it becomes very challenging to kind of, go through, let's say, 10 villages. It would need a lot of resourcing and the right business models. So I think that would be the business model would be a challenge, not technology. I would think for rural. Scale would be a challenge as well, because individual households would have only that pit to kind of be extracted off and all this stuff. So I think the challenge in rural is definitely there from the business model point of view and scalability point of view. And I think we need to think of it differently to reach there. Very soon, when all homes will have water now. By 2022, every home will have water. So now what might happen, at least in the first 2-3 years, is that there will be additional challenge of grey water emerging in larger quantities. Yeah. How do you deal with that? Because if not addressed properly, it can create puddles where mosquitoes will thrive, and you will have all the other vector-borne diseases, etc., coming up. So I think it needs a bit of an in-depth deliberation and thinking on addressing the rural problem. I think the urban is perhaps a little bit more straightforward than the rural. I agree with you.
Thank you.
So, Dr. Nimish, we have a few questions from the attendees, from the participants. We have one, Mr. Ram Shankar, who's part of the Rain Center of Tamil Nadu and based out of Adayar. So his question is, the biodigester solutions that you have indicated, can this be retrofitted into the existing systems?
Yeah, there have been. I mean, I do not specifically know about the company I referred to, but there are opportunities of biodigester systems being retrofitted to existing systems. The only challenge will be to what extent you will retrofit. For example, if grey water and black water is already coming mixed, then your fecal matter load in terms of dilution is relatively less. So for you to get meaningful yield out of it may be a challenge. However, if in a new building, the black water discharge is separated and collected only for biogas purpose, you have a more enriched organic matter, and that can give you better yields as compared to a more dilute thing. So it depends on what extent you can retrofit. Yeah.
The same person, Mr. Ram Shankar, he was interested in knowing about effective grey water harvesting. He's saying grey water harvesting or recycling. He has a dual pipe system already existing in his apartments or in his systems.
Good.
But how do we really manage these challenges now? That is the biggest question, where he needs an evaluation of his system and he wants some recommendations and for things for improvement.
Sure. So I think there will be somebody in our ecosystem who deals with this grey water. We can make some linkages. So if you can have the email contacts made for both of us, then we can carry on that discussion. I don't have an answer right away.
We can do that. We have he has been our regular attendee in several of our platforms. We have one question from one Mr. Vishal. Most of these issues are community based. How you are thinking of including community in finding the solution? How do we include them?
Yeah, I think the communities need to understand this firstly. So the way I look at it is that I always look upon to the younger generation, students, including school students, are very highly motivated to protect the planet. Yeah. And I think they become our, I would say, change leaders in some sense. Yeah. If we are able to engage with them and tell them the reason why this is important, that there are not only benefits to the community in terms of saving water, making the lives easier, etc., but also there is this wider thing about protecting the planet from getting degraded and polluted. I think that would be a good starting point to bring about a change. And the other thing obviously is that, as we are urbanizing, what is likely to happen, and especially in cities like Bangalore and Chennai, as the cities expand towards the fringes, you will see more and more large scale housing complexes coming up. can they start this kind of a thinking from the beginning rather than retrofitting and all this stuff? Yeah. So that could be something that can be incorporated even before they start construction. So I would say these two things.
Yeah, one more question from our colleague. We have one, Mr. Umang Khanna. He's operating from Meerut. So he's asking, do we have any amendments that we can think of in the National Building Code towards incorporating something in terms of the grey water management or something?
I think so. That's the see. So if I remember, in case of Tamil Nadu, there was this regulation, or there may still be, that every house, new house that is constructed should have rainwater harvesting, right? And that was a regulation. Yeah. Why not for any new housing complex above a certain number of residential units, make the dual system mandatory? Grey water discharge and black water discharge. So even if it is going for centralized treatment, you can send only the black water and let the grey water be done locally. That would mean a beginning, and I think that that's the kind of legislation that is required to promote entrepreneurship as well. Only when you do it, then you create a business opportunity. Yeah.
So Mr. Manish was mentioning about 30,000 crores as funds available, isn't it? For any work on decentralized or WASH related activities, where particularly on the O&M of water sanitation and hygiene, and that too at the Gram Panchayat levels, the the funds are readily available. But what is the approach that organizations like ICCW should take up in going to the level of probably utilizing these funds for the O&M? We have been working on the system of water purification systems, particularly the CDI and so on, where we have been working with Government of Punjab and others on putting these installations across and utilizing funds of this nature in drinking water purification. But we have not been able to get into the sector of wastewater, particularly the grey water and so on. How do we really pitch ourselves to such a fund that is available and utilize those funds for better cause?
Perhaps I can ask Manish to respond, because I know that there is. Okay. Yeah, I know that they have earmarked this fund, but I think this fund is directly meant for what I have understood is that it is directly meant for companies who will offer those services. So what they have said is that per Gram Panchayat, they are giving 4 lakhs to construct 2 public toilets. Yeah. With that, what can be ensured is that even if a person is outside the home for 12-15 hours or whatever, there is still a public toilet to access, and therefore open defecation will be prevented. Yeah. So there is a capex being granted at 4 lakhs for creating 2 public toilets per Gram Panchayat, and I believe that this 30,000 crore is allocated for upkeep and maintenance, because otherwise these will simply become useless in no time, if they are not maintained. So I don't know how a technical institution like ICCW could access that funds, but perhaps engage in entrepreneurship who can come up with some technology that can do the operations and maintenance at a very, very low cost and low resource. That would be something to think about.
Nandakumar, you have any thoughts? Mr. Nandakumar, are you online?
Okay. Okay. I think the funds are available, and ICCW also has an incubation hub. So I think it's an opportunity where Professor Indumati talked about startups in the Carbon Zero Challenge contest. So we are working with some of these startups, and some of them have got good, I would say, circular economy ideas, and we are nurturing them through an accelerator program. Hopefully, they will be in a position to apply some of their technologies in the field. It's a long journey, I can imagine, for this to happen in a large scale, but it's encouraging to hear that there is funds available and something that we can put to good use.
I think, Sripati, let me add one point here. Toilet Board being an international organization, activity, and there are many players globally. Maybe we should ask Dr. Shah to comment upon what are the best practices globally and what could we learn from that and what are the directions forward.
Yeah, so I think that what we have learned in the past from other countries is that it is possible to scale up very fast. Give an example of a company based out of Africa. They started really a business on container-based sanitation. Yeah. So they had an entire value chain approach where instead of constructing toilets, they gave them portable toilet seats, yeah, which would collect the waste in the bottom, and those would be like container cassettes. So a person would come and just pick up those container cassettes, and those were very neatly done so that there is no spillage and all the stuff. And then this container cassettes are collected from the community and taken to I won't say centralized, but a kind of a medium focal point, yeah, wherein these will be washed, the refuse collected and converted into something like, say, briquettes for use by industry into, say, boilers and all the stuff. And the washed container cassettes come back to the household. Now, this kind of a thing, instead of constructing a full toilet, and which is very capital intensive, this became a pay-as-you-go model. You pay rent for that thing, and the business is recovering money from the user and also recovering money from the briquettes. Yeah, so complete circular economy model, and very unique one. And there are quite a few other examples, including from within India, which can be highlighted. And we recently published a report along with Ernst & Young to showcase some of these emerging business models of which have reached scale. So I'm happy to forward a link to you, Shripati, which you can then send it to everybody.
I think in connection with what you're saying, business models, I'll be very happy to see your report with Ernst & Young.
Sure.
I have found, basically working with startups, the challenge in India, because of the water pricing and the fertilizer pricing being subsidized.
Yes.
The biggest challenge we are facing is that it has to be done at a policy level. Okay. Because even in a place like Chennai, where we have so much water shortage, people think about grey water recycling only in the summer months. And once they tide over the crisis, everybody forgets about it. And Absolutely. So they don't want to invest on a system which probably they'll use only for a couple of months a year.
Correct.
And particularly when it comes to like fertilizer recovery, as I told, one of the startups from Carbon Zero are doing a urine separation system. We have one set up in IIT Madras, our own building, where there is urine diversion and they make fertilizer. We get very high quality ammonia solution and fertilizers. But then how do we market this at a scale like that? When fertilizer is subsidized, we import fertilizer, subsidize it. So how do we compete with that? Even though we claim that we have carbon footprint is low and all the plus with our system. So how do you think
I think
challenges?
I agree with you that it has to be policy level, and the policy level change can happen by putting in front of the policymakers the damage that they are causing to the environment and then impacting the same people who are getting subsidized today. Yeah. So what we are essentially doing is just trapping humongous amount of nitrogen at a huge environmental cost in terms of carbon emitted and producing fertilizers, which is not making any sense to the farmer whose temperatures are going up and therefore his paddy yield is going down, regardless of amount of fertilizer he or she adds, and other challenges like the pests coming in because of the higher temperatures and all the stuff. So unless policymakers, the environmental angle and the cost thereof, and therefore I wanted to title my talk as the consequence of inaction, is this basically. And I think we collectively need to make an informed policymaker that they need to pay an environmental cost, which is not immediate, but definitely is not very far away. It is seen now. We are in the midst of such a thing.
I think more and more it is turning out towards circular sanitation economy, isn't it, Dr. Shah? That when you say agriculture, it comes as temperature, then temperature when it comes into paddy cultivation, and you name about fertilizers, it comes into this economy. All that comes as a circular economy, and this is, I would say, a new norm for us in this kind of a sector that we are working on, clean water. We are trying to work on clean water with the same sort of circular economy that we are trying to build in this wastewater as a sector. So this is again a great learning for us today in how do we understand the subject of circular sanitation economy. We have just started thinking, and I think we should rethink our strategies towards putting our minds together and work in very, very small areas so that we are able to do some big things in the coming years and decades and so on. Yeah, Professor, do you have any thoughts? Parting thoughts? We will close it by another 2-3 minutes now.
Just wanted to mention that our Indian mindset is also a huge issue. How do you utilize human excreta for our well-being? And this another society would view it differently, for example, in China or somewhere else. It's also, how do you address this deep inhibition in our society? Do we have another kind of, let us say, a crop which can use feces better? Can we move towards better agricultural practices? I mean, it's a complex question. Even if you circulate all of these in the rural economy, will it ever find use in the fields?
Yeah, so Professor Pradeep, I have a view around this, is that, when anything new is started, either, economic or cultural barriers are the first one to push it back. Yeah. And if you see the history that has happened with many technologies, if you look at the GMO technologies, then there was a huge resistance to that. Yeah. What agriculturists who were promoting these technologies did is they first tried this in non-food crops, cotton. So BT cotton is very famous because, and it's considered pioneering. It has changed the lives of farmers. Yeah. And cotton is not consumed by human beings. It is only worn. Yeah. And then slowly GM soybean, then slowly GM brinjal, all these things started coming, and these have become part of daily lives of people. So I believe that there are starting points which can be accessed with some ease as compared to difficult parts. Yeah. And then maybe after learning from that, we can then go to the next stage and then move further. Yeah. So I believe that it's not something that is happening tomorrow, but I think that the time is right to start today.
Yeah. I think cost can beat all these stigmas. No? Somebody is going to price these at 1/4 the price of a fertilizer. I think people will change their mindset.
Yeah.
And the form, actually, it's the fecal matter is in a form. It's just going to be looking like any other fertilizer. Yeah. So then probably it will be more acceptable.
Well, our society is not scientifically literate adequately. and as a result, phosphorus from this is the same as phosphorus from phosphate. Is a very difficult concept to be brought into the society. And that being the case, there is a larger involvement of education in this activity. So as a result, let us say if rice is grown with even a tiny bit of phosphorus from human excreta, I don't know, will it be priced differently by our society?
Yeah, we don't know that.
But actually speaking, we are there are places where peri-urban areas raw sewage is being used.
Yeah, it's already
for
been
irrigation.
Correct.
Right, and this is a much better form than that.
Absolutely. But so therefore, there is an activity that Hindu Nambi and people like that should do to ensure. I mean, I know that there are several experiments going on to demonstrate that these things are indeed, there is no difference, however you cultivate. And that has to get into our textbook, that has to get into our education system. Yeah.
Very true.
So we would like to start here. I would say I would not stop here. We would like to start here for the next steps or the next best practices. We will try and evolve next best practices from now on to see how India can bring out several of these things together, particularly the circular sanitation economy that we are trying to bring out. And as we say circular, everyone is going to get benefited, right from the end user to the probably a funder or probably the technology provider or the implementing agency or anything anybody in that chain of events that are going to happen. Thank you, Professor Indumati Nambi. Thank you, Professor Pradeep, for your time in your busy schedules. And in spite of the internet challenges that everyone is facing, you have been kind enough to come in within a very short notice to share your perspectives. And Dr. Nimish, you have been very kind enough to start working with us. And Professor Pradeep and Professor Nambi, we are happy to inform you that the Toilet Board Coalition wants to work with ICCW in a very long term, sharing their activities together. Probably we would pitch in with some consortia sort of projects across the country in terms of UNICEF and others. We are working out the modalities or business model that can come into it. And we request your support also, Professor Nambi, to help us in taking to the several ideas that you have brought in, particularly the Carbon Zero Challenge and the cohorts that you are part of it. So how do we really make this as a movement is the biggest question mark in front of us right now. We are just naive in taking this idea today, but we request your support with Dr. Nimish also in taking this forward. Now I would like request Radhika to sum up and close the session for the time being. We will again reassemble on an individual basis on various aspects that we have discussed. And as we move on, we have been with 25 attendees in the last 1.5 hours. And this has been done by Radhika and Umang within a short notice of 2 days. Within 2 days, they have reached to all the participants whom we identified. We have not identified or sent a mailer to several people, but we have identified very few people whom they have taken up time and joined us today within a very short notice. And I thank all the participants who have been with us in this call. And I request them again to come back to our such sorts of water talks. And this water talks is a part of the series that we have been organizing every month. And this is the 5th edition that we have organized today. Earlier, we had Dr. Jayashree Venkateshan, Dr. M.B. Nirmal, and we had Mr. K. Sitaraman, Dr. Indukant Ragade. They were all enlightening us on several aspects of water and wastewater management. We have learned a lot from them. We have been talking to them on various aspects. Probably, Dr. Shah, we will again come back to you in taking our discussions forward in the right perspective. So, Ms. Radhika, would you like to sum up?
Yeah, so it was such an eye-opener for all of us. What wash and sanitation and the economy that it offers, the business that it provides, and how we all can take it forward. and build a better India, a better globe where our future generation can stay together happily, healthy. So thanks a lot, and to provide us a detailed description on the circular sanitation economy. Thanks, Dr. Manish, Dr. Nimisha, thank you, Professor Indu Nambi, thank you, Professor Pradeep. So, and thanks all the attendees who had taken their time to attend this event. So I think, as Shripati mentioned, we will start from here, and Toilet Board Coalition and ICCW will together move forward for a better sanitation and how we all can together work hard to make this earth a better place to live. Thanks everyone. Thanks Nandakumar, Shripati, and all the team ICCW and all the attendees, students of IIT Madras. Thank you.
Thank you. Stay safe. Have a nice day.
Have a good night. Good night.